Sometimes the most unexpected stories begin with the most ordinary moments. Mine started on a quiet Tuesday morning while making breakfast, and I never imagined how it would end. I was standing at the stove, flipping pancakes, when my son's friend knocked at the door, and what happened next still makes my heart race when I think about it. Before I take you into the story, I'd love to know, from which city or town are you watching today? Drop it in the comments. And if you enjoy stories that pull you in with emotion, honesty, and just a touch of the unexpected, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you don't miss what comes next. Now let me tell you what happened that morning. The smell of sizzling butter filled the kitchen, mingling with the aroma of fresh coffee. I'd always found something peaceful about cooking. The rhythm of chopping, the low hum of the toaster, the way the morning light spilled across the tiled counter. At 50, I've learned to appreciate the quiet moments. My son Daniel was still asleep upstairs. He's 23, just finishing college and back home for a few weeks to save money before moving out. I was glad to have him back. The house always felt more alive when he was here, even if he still left socks everywhere and forgot to rinse his dishes. Some things never change. I had just poured the pancake batter onto the hot griddle when I heard the front doorbell. It was 8:45 a.m. Early for visitors. I wiped my hands on the towel tucked into my waistband and walked to the door. When I opened it, I was greeted by a familiar face, Ben. Ben was Daniel's best friend from high school. They'd been inseparable during those teenage years, riding bikes around the neighborhood, gaming late into the night, talking about girls and dreams like the world had no limits. I hadn't seen Ben in a while, maybe a year or two since he'd moved out of state. He stood there holding a small paper bag and a cup carrier with 2 coffees. He looked taller than I remembered, though I suppose it had more to do with his posture. Confident, relaxed, a little scruffy. In that way young men try to seem casual, but you can tell they took time getting it just right. "Morning, Mrs. Fields," he said, smiling. "I brought breakfast reinforcements." I laughed softly. "Well, that's very thoughtful. Come in. Daniel's still upstairs being a lazy 20-something. Ben stepped inside, and something about the way he looked at me made me a little more aware of myself. Not in a nervous way, just present. I tucked a loose strand of hair behind my ear and led him into the kitchen. "Smells amazing in here," he said as he placed the coffees on the counter. "You always had the best breakfast game. I still dream about your banana pancakes." "Luckily for you, they're back on the menu today," I smiled, turning back to the griddle. Ben slid into a stool at the island, resting his elbows on the counter. "How have you been, really?" he asked. There was a pause. It wasn't the polite, passing kind of "how are you?" It had weight. He really wanted to know. I hesitated, surprised by the sincerity in his voice. "I've been okay," I said honestly. "It's been a bit of a quiet year. Work's been slower. I'm not quite used to the house being this empty most days, but I'm managing." Ben nodded, his gaze never leaving mine. "I'd always liked how calm it was here," he said. "Even when we were teenagers, your home always felt warm, like a safe place." Something about the way he said it made my chest feel strangely tight. I turned back to the stove, flipping a pancake to avoid his eyes for a moment. "Well, life gets a little quieter when the kids grow up," I said lightly. "But I'm glad you stopped by. It's nice seeing you again." He smiled. I was hoping it wouldn't be weird. I actually meant to call first, but I was driving past and just turned in. "Not weird at all," I said, sliding pancakes onto a plate. "You're always welcome here." We sat and ate together while Daniel continued to sleep. He was always impossible to wake before 10. Ben and I talked, first about safe topics, work, mutual friends, funny stories from the past. But as time went on, the conversation shifted. He asked me about the divorce, something Daniel barely touched on. I told him bits and pieces. I didn't overshare, but I didn't hide either. I'd married young. We'd grown apart. It ended quietly, respectfully. But loneliness had crept in since then, subtle and unannounced. Ben listened, really listened, and when I got quiet, unsure if I'd said too much, he reached across the counter and lightly touched my hand. "You didn't deserve to feel that alone," he said gently. "You're too kind, too full of light." I didn't know what to say. That moment stretched, full of something I couldn't quite name. Gratitude? Affection? A shared understanding that something about us, our ages, our roles, made this a strange moment, but not an unwelcome one. I looked down at his hand, still lightly resting on mine, and I didn't pull away. Not yet. Then Daniel's heavy footsteps thundered down the stairs. "Morning," he called out, stretching as he entered the kitchen. "Dude, is that you? What are you doing here?" Ben quickly pulled his hand back, and I slid my plate aside, standing to refill the coffee pot like nothing had happened. "Just catching up," Ben said easily. "Brought some coffee and breakfast. Thought I'd surprise you." Daniel grinned, clapping his friend on the shoulder. "Man, good timing. Mom's pancakes are the real deal." I smiled, but my mind was racing. Because in that brief window of quiet connection, something shifted, and I wasn't sure what it meant yet, only that it was real. Something had stirred inside me I hadn't felt in a long time, and I wasn't ready to ignore it. After that morning, things didn't go back to normal. Not right away. I kept replaying the moment in the kitchen, the warmth of his hand over mine, the way his eyes didn't look away when I got vulnerable, and how natural it felt talking to him. I'd told myself it was just a passing moment, a flicker of emotion sparked by nostalgia and the surprise of seeing someone who once felt like a second son. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. Ben stayed for nearly an hour after Daniel woke up, and though the energy in the room had shifted, he was as easygoing as ever. He and Daniel joked around, played a quick round of some game on Daniel's phone, and made vague plans to grab lunch later in the week. I stayed mostly quiet, smiling when expected, but my mind was elsewhere. After he left, I stood by the window for a few minutes, watching him walk to his car. I thought I saw him glance back at the house before pulling away, but I wasn't sure. My heart beat faster than it should have. It felt absurd, inappropriate even, but I couldn't shake the feeling. That night, after Daniel had gone out with friends, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on the back porch wrapped in a blanket. The cicadas were humming, the air smelled faintly of jasmine from the garden, and the sky was painted in deep navy streaked with stars. I'd never thought of Ben like that before, not until that morning. He was Daniel's friend, a good kid, a man now, yes, but still, someone from a different part of my life. And yet, when I closed my eyes, I remembered how his voice softened when he asked about the divorce. How attentively he listened. How gently, instinctively, he reached for my hand. He didn't see me as just his friend's mom. And that realization sent a ripple through me I didn't know how to name. The next few days passed uneventfully. I stayed busy with work. I helped manage the administrative side of a local art center, and Daniel came and went as he pleased. We didn't talk about that morning. I doubted he even noticed anything odd. Then, on Friday afternoon, I got a message. From Ben. Just a simple text. "Hey, I'm in the area again. Can I drop by? Got something I forgot to give you." My pulse quickened. I stared at the screen for a moment, then typed, "Of course, I'll be home." 20 minutes later, the doorbell rang. This time, I didn't hesitate. Ben stood there holding a small brown envelope. He smiled, that same relaxed, slightly crooked smile, and held it up like a peace offering. I found some old photos of you and Daniel from the senior year bake sale. Thought you might like them. I meant to bring them the other day. I took the envelope and opened it. Inside were a few printed photos, grainy but sweet. There was one of me in an apron, flour on my cheek, Daniel making a silly face beside me. Ben was in the background of a few shots too, always close to Daniel, always smiling. I laughed. God, I look exhausted in these. You looked radiant, Ben said, his tone steady. I looked up. He wasn't joking. Something heavy hung between us, and for a second, the air in the hallway felt charged. He glanced past me, into the quiet of the house. Is Daniel home? He asked. No, I said softly. He went to see a movie. He won't be back for a while. He nodded once. Can I come in? I stepped aside. This time there was no pretense of coffee or breakfast. We walked into the living room. I sat on the edge of the couch. He remained standing, hands in his pockets. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he said, I hope this doesn't make things weird. I don't want to complicate anything, but I've been thinking about the other day, a lot. I met his eyes. So have I admitted. He walked closer slowly, like giving me time to change my mind. You're probably thinking this is ridiculous, he said. I mean, I get it. The age difference, our history, who I am in Daniel's life. I didn't respond, not because I disagreed, but because I wasn't sure what to say. He continued, but that morning, I didn't expect to feel what I felt. I saw you, not just as Daniel's mom, or someone from my past, but as a woman who deserves to be seen, really seen. That last part broke something in me. Tears sprang to my eyes, unexpected and sharp. You don't know how long it's been since someone said that, I whispered. He sat beside me, close but not touching, respectful, waiting. I'm not trying to rush anything, he said. I just wanted to be honest. If you feel nothing, say the word. I'll back off. No awkwardness. I just couldn't walk away without telling you. I turned to face him, wiping at my cheek. I don't know what this is, I said. I don't even know what I'm feeling exactly, but I know it's not nothing. He smiled softly, that same patient expression from before. That's enough, he said. For now. He stood, and for a moment I thought he was going to leave. But then he looked at me, searching, like he wanted to make sure I truly meant it. I nodded. He exhaled. I'll text you, he said. And he left, just like that. I closed the door behind him, heart pounding, hands trembling slightly. The photos still sat on the table. I looked at them again, but this time they felt different, like a bridge between the past and whatever this strange, unexpected new thing might become. I wasn't foolish enough to think I had answers yet, but I knew something had been set in motion, and I wasn't ready to stop it. The next few days were filled with an electricity I hadn't felt in years. Ben didn't text right away, and I'm glad he didn't. It gave me space to think, to breathe, to ask myself questions I hadn't considered in a long time, questions about what I wanted, not just as a mother, not just as someone rebuilding after a quiet divorce, but as a woman. The days felt different. I moved through them more aware of myself, how I dressed, how I carried myself. I caught myself checking my phone more than usual, wondering if he'd reach out, then scolding myself like a teenager. But beneath the self-consciousness, there was something else. Hope. Then, one evening, a soft ping. Ben, still thinking about you. Can we talk soon? I stared at the screen. My heart fluttered in that nervous, giddy way I thought only happened in your 20s. But there it was, undeniable, bright, and real. Me? Yes. When? Ben. I'm free tonight, if that's not too forward. It wasn't. Daniel was working a late shift at the coffee shop downtown. He wouldn't be home until after 11. I checked the time, 7:12 p.m. Me? Come over around 8? Ben, I'll bring something sweet. I wasn't sure what to expect. I changed my top twice, left my hair down. I wasn't trying to impress him. At least that's what I told myself. But I did want to feel good. Not young, not artificial, just seen. At 8:04, the doorbell rang. Ben stood there holding a small bakery box and 2 lattes. I figured dessert and coffee was safer than wine, he said with a crooked grin. Probably a good call, I smiled, letting him in. We sat in the living room again, but this time the atmosphere was more open. Less hesitation, more curiosity. He handed me a chocolate tart and kept glancing at me like he was still trying to believe this was real. So, he said finally, is this real? I sipped my coffee, letting the warmth settle my nerves. That depends, I said softly. Are we being honest? He set his cup down. Always. I nodded. Then yes, it feels real to me. He exhaled, relief washing over his features. I've thought about this so much, and every time I come back to the same place, I don't care how unconventional it is. I care how I feel when I'm around you. I studied him. Ben, I'm not naive. I know this is complicated. There's a gap between us. In age, in life stage, in experience. That doesn't scare me, but it does matter. He leaned forward slightly. Then let's not pretend it doesn't. Let's not rush anything or label it. Let's just explore it. Carefully, respectfully. And if it ever stops feeling honest, we stop. I hadn't realized how badly I needed to hear that. That this didn't have to be reckless. That it could be thoughtful, mature, human. We talked for hours. About the years between now and then, about how we both changed. He told me he'd always admired me. Not in a romantic way back then, of course, but as someone who carried grace even when life got messy. He remembered how I handled Daniel's rebellion during senior year with patience, how I volunteered at their school despite juggling my own work, how I smiled at people even when I was tired. I noticed things, he said quietly. Maybe I didn't understand them then, but I see them clearly now. I felt something stir inside me, not just desire, but recognition. For the first time in a long time, someone saw the full picture of me. Not just the role I played, but the woman behind it. He stayed until almost midnight. We didn't kiss. Not yet. But as he stood to leave, he touched my cheek gently and said, "If this goes nowhere, I'll still be grateful I got to feel something this honest." I stood there long after he left, fingers brushing the spot where his hand had been. Something was happening, and I wasn't scared of it anymore. The next time we met, it wasn't at my house. Ben suggested we go for a walk, somewhere neutral, somewhere away from watchful eyes or neighborhood whispers. We drove out to a nearby trail just outside town, surrounded by trees and winding footpaths. The sun was low, casting long shadows and golden light through the branches. As we walked, we talked about everything and nothing, the way people do when they're trying to map the new terrain between them. I told him more about my past, about how the divorce had left not scars, but quiet vacancies, about how I'd built a life out of practicality, but always felt like I'd tucked away pieces of myself to survive, about the fear of starting over at 50, not because I felt too old, but because I wasn't sure if anyone would ever really want me again. Not just my time or my care, but me. Ben stopped walking. He turned toward me, his expression tender and clear. "I want you to know something," he said. "This, whatever it becomes, isn't about filling some gap in my life. And it's not about rescuing you either. You don't need rescuing. I see you completely, and I like what I see. For a moment, my throat tightened. I blinked hard. Then quietly I said, I don't know how to explain it, Ben. You make me feel alive again, but also a little scared. He reached for my hand. Then we'll take it one step at a time, and I'll be patient. I promise. The wind rustled the trees around us. The scent of pine and warm earth filled the air. And right there on that quiet path, with my fingers woven through his, something new began. Not loud, not wild, but honest, grown, real. And I was ready to see where it might go. There's a moment, after everything shifts, when you stop holding your breath. For me, that moment came 2 weeks after that walk with Ben. The trail, the late sunlight, his hand in mine, it all lingered in my thoughts like a soft melody I didn't want to end. But life continued. The laundry still piled up. The work emails still pinged. Daniel still left cereal bowls in the sink. And yet, I had changed. Ben and I kept our growing connection private. Not hidden in shame, just protected. We met for walks, coffee, long drives with no destination. We didn't rush. Every conversation deepened something between us. There was laughter, shared silences, even awkward pauses, but none of it felt wrong. Then, one Saturday morning, I stood at the sink washing dishes when Daniel appeared in the doorway, arms crossed, brows raised. So, he said casually, you and Ben. Is there something going on? My heart stuttered. I turned off the faucet. I hadn't prepared for this moment. I thought I had time. Why do you ask? I said carefully. Daniel shrugged, stepping into the kitchen. I'm not stupid, Mom. You two have been texting. He's been by a few times when I wasn't home. And he's been weirdly happy lately. So, I'm asking. I dried my hands slowly. Yes, I said finally. There's something developing between us. We didn't plan it. It just happened. He didn't speak right away. I watched his jaw work, eyes flicking to the window, then back to me. I didn't expect that, he admitted. At first, I was weirded out. Like, that's my best friend. But then, I thought about it. I waited, nerves dancing under my skin. I want you to be happy, he said quietly. And Ben, he's a good guy. If anyone's going to treat you with respect, it's him. Emotion swelled in my chest. Thank you, I said, voice catching. That means more than you know. He gave me a quick hug, tight, strong, awkward in the way adult sons hug their mothers, and then muttered, just don't be gross about it, okay? I laughed through the tears. Deal. That evening, I told Ben what had happened. He looked relieved. I was worried he'd be upset. He's not. He's processing. But he gave his blessing in his own way. Ben nodded, then reached for my hand. Then maybe we don't have to be so careful anymore. I squeezed his fingers. Maybe not. We decided to take a weekend trip. Nothing extravagant, just a small cabin up north, nestled by a lake. It was quiet, surrounded by tall trees and the soothing hush of water against the shore. The kind of place where time slowed down, where you could listen to your heartbeat and believe, for a moment, that nothing else mattered. It was there, one golden evening as the sun dipped behind the pines, that Ben stood beside me on the deck, his arm around my waist, and said, I don't know what the future holds, but I know I want you in it. The wind tugged at my hair. I turned to look at him, his eyes so full of sincerity it nearly broke me. I don't need promises, I said softly. I just want honesty, presence, and this feeling, this peace. He leaned in and kissed me, not rushed, not hesitant, but full of warmth and quiet certainty. And in that kiss, I felt everything I hadn't dared to hope for. Not just desire, but trust. Not just affection, but respect. Not just romance, but something deeper, something earned. That night, lying beside him with the moonlight tracing patterns on the wooden ceiling, I found myself thinking back over the last few years, the quiet dinners alone, the empty bed, the way I had convinced myself that love after a certain age was either impractical or a fantasy. But Ben proved otherwise. He saw me, not as a role, not as a relic of someone's childhood, but as a full, complicated, vibrant woman. And being with him didn't make me feel younger. It made me feel more me than I'd felt in years. When we returned home, things shifted again, but naturally. We didn't flaunt anything, but we didn't hide either. Ben would come by for dinner. Sometimes he'd help me fix things around the house. Sometimes we'd sit in the garden, hands entwined, the scent of lavender thick in the air. Neighbors raised eyebrows. A few whispered comments reached me through the grapevine. But I didn't care, because for once I was living truthfully. Daniel even teased us once, playfully rolling his eyes as he walked into the kitchen and saw us slow dancing to an old jazz record. "Oh God," he groaned, "I'm getting out before this turns into a movie." Ben laughed. I blushed, and life went on. But this time it felt full. Not perfect, but real, raw, beautiful. And as I sat one evening with a glass of wine in hand, watching the sunset through the living room window, Ben's voice drifted in from the hallway, humming some tune I didn't recognize. I smiled, because sometimes life doesn't give you what you expected. It gives you what you needed in a form you never saw coming. And all you have to do is open the door.